All right, moving on. In a notable shift in tone, China says it is currently addressing recent U.S. proposals to begin trade talks, a move that could potentially open the door for negotiations between the world's two largest economies. A spokesperson for China's Commerce Ministry said that Washington had sent multiple messages through various channels expressing interest in starting talks. And as per the spokesman, Beijing is now evaluating those overtures. These signals and this outreach is a softening in China's previously hardline stance amid increased tensions that were sparked by Trump's sweeping tariffs. Trump has repeatedly claimed that negotiations with Chinese officials are already underway, but those claims have been flatly denied by Beijing. China has reiterated that any talks would require the U.S. to demonstrate sincerity by reversing its tariff hikes and correcting what it called wrongdoings. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said this week that the tariffs have seriously damaged China's economy, causing job losses and leading Beijing to seek talks. He suggested that negotiations could begin soon, and tariffs have escalated dramatically this month, with the U.S. imposing rates as high as 245% on Chinese imports. As both sides weigh their options, Beijing made clear that it will not be the first to blink. In a video shared earlier this week, China's foreign ministry said that the country would not kneel down to what it called America's bully tactics. All right, Andrew K.P. Leung, independent Chinese strategist, is joining us at this point in time. Andrew, appreciate you taking out the time and speaking with us. Well, 245% is a lot, but what is actually going on over here? If you're privy to the inside information, Donald Trump says that there is an agreement being discussed with China. The Chinese authorities are denying this. What exactly is going on over here?
Well, one has to look at the dynamics and see which side has a stronger card in President Trump's words. If you look at the reliance on exports, as far as China is concerned, the reliance on the American export market has declined from 18.12% in 2018 to something like 14.7% now. And secondly, of course, China remains the largest exporter and trader for the rest of the world, and is pivoting towards the global south for the trade. And as since Trump 1.0 has built up its own self-reliance on key technologies, witness the emergence of DeepSeek, for example, in the AI field. And of course, if you look at the kind of products the United States is selling to China, mainly Airbus, as well as soybeans, but these are substitutable. China, of course, can buy aircraft from the Europeans, the Airbus, and soybeans from Brazil. And then, of course, the Chinese economy is pivoting towards services. Even though internal consumption still remains rather anemic, but the services alone already exceeds, in terms of proportion contribution to the GDP, more than exports. So I think you look at the dynamics, and it's clearly the United States depend on China's products more than the other way around. But if you look, you go to any supermarket in the United States, nearly all of the products are made in China. And even though they are not marked made in China, China is embedded in them in terms of materials, rare earths, components, spare parts. So even those products are imported to the United States from other countries. And then, of course, after the tariffs have exceeded a certain percentage, the rest are just numbers. They're totally meaningless because there's simply no trade possible when tariffs exceed so more than 50% or more. And then, of course, the American consumers are facing hugely increased prices as well as empty shelves. And of course, there is already increasing protests amongst the American citizens to rising inflation and lack of the daily necessities. Almost 5 million Americans have taken to the streets over the past couple of weeks. So if you look at that and Trump's repeated rhetoric that the trades are talking suggests an eagerness on the part of the United States, not necessarily matched by China. But of course, China has never ruled out the possibility of negotiations. Right from the very start, it's a war started by the United States. China doesn't buy into a tariff war. And of course, trade, of course, is China's lifeblood. But as pointed out in your starting introduction, China doesn't want to be reduced to the position of a supplicant. It's prepared to enter into negotiations as an equal. Now, what does equal mean? When the United States impose high tariffs unilaterally, that's not an equal negotiation position. So Beijing is making it quite clear that they're always prepared for negotiations. But first of all, the United States has got to abolish all these tariffs right from the start. It doesn't mean that they can't reimpose these tariffs later on as negotiations go on, or even increase these tariffs. But then for a start, both sides should be treated equally with no tariffs on the China side, no tariffs on the American side, but both sides reserving its position. That is a more equal position for both to negotiate. But I think that the chances for a deal is quite high because I don't think that the United States, for example, is suffering some huge blowbacks in the stock market, in the bond market, and people are losing confidence in the position of the long-term durability of the dollar. And most of all, Americans' credibility as a leader of a rule-based world, because the rule-based order has been is lying in tatters. So I think that China wants to enter into negotiations, but on an equal footing. But I think that's more likely is that. Of course, China is addressing the imbalance between the two economies. China's saving too much and may have to open up its market for American investment. And American economy, the manufacturing has been hollowed out over the past few decades, owing to the American administration's penchant for just financial maximization.
All right.
So I think that there is possibility exists for some manufacturing to be relocated from mainland, from China to the United States, but owned by China. So the progression of this kind of model from China being making things for European or American brands, the so-called OEM in the early days, to created in China, like the new enterprises like Alibaba and Tencent,
Right.
to now owned by China. In other words, China's operations are owned by China, but they're already been happening in the developing world. But I think that this is likely to happen maybe as a result of the trade deal.
All right, Andrew, appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much for those valuable insights. Moving on, in a significant shift, reports are emerging that